What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? After more than 150 conversations with executives from companies like Disney, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, I've learned that sports is a common denominator. Some of our guests' athletic experiences earned them a place in their sports hall of fame, like Chick-fil-A chairman Dan Cathy. Some hung up their cleats after high school, like Delta Airlines CEO Ed Bastian, while others, like Condoleezza Rice, claim they weren't that great in their sport. But no matter their skill level, they have all told me that being a part of a team taught them leadership lessons that they still use today. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, I'm your host, Don Yeager, here to give you an all-access pass to genuine, authentic, fireside chat-like conversations with today's business icons so that you can create powerful change in your organization. This is Corporate Competitor Podcast. With me for today's episode is the CEO of Touchstone Investments, Blake Moore, a former NFL player who defied the odds as an undrafted free agent, playing 6 seasons in the league and going to the Super Bowl. Blake's journey from Worcester College to the NFL is filled with fascinating stories, including playing in one of the coldest games in NFL history. After his football career, Blake attended Harvard Law School, and now as the CEO of Touchstone Investments, he leads a company with more than $25 billion in assets under management. Make sure to check out corporatecompetitorpodcast.com/notes for my notes from today's session. You'll find my favorite quotes and reflection questions to help you apply today's insights.
I often don't have the right answer. If there's a lot of groupthink, before you know it, you'll get passed by people that are willing to embrace new ideas and change. So it's okay to have a different viewpoint from me. If you ask my team, I hope they would say, oh yeah, we've told Blake he's wrong plenty of times. And I am wrong plenty of times. Sure. If you aren't careful about that, people will just default to whatever you say or suggest. Be cognizant of that.
Blake, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Don, it's great to be on. Thanks for having me.
You know, I'm fascinated by this idea that you entered the NFL as an undrafted free agent. The odds, crazy. But you make it not just on the team, but all the way to the Super Bowl. One lesson that I know you've emphasized from your NFL experience is that settling for average is never an option if you want to succeed.
Yeah. Some of this came from being raised by my mom, who was a very competitive person in my life. I have learned over time that the things that really matter, if you just settle for average, you're never going to really set yourself apart, and you probably won't succeed. That came home to me with a lot of clarity in the NFL. That first rookie season, I was a rookie free agent from the College of Worcester.
Proudly
from the College of Worcester. Go Scots. Certainly not expected to make the team, but getting an opportunity. And in that first training camp up at Wilmington College, north of Cincinnati, walked into the offensive line team room. There are 15 NFL linemen in that room. And at the end of 4 weeks, 8 people will be on the team. That crystallizes that when you walk into that room, if you're going to be average, you're never going to be one of those 8. You got to be a lot better than average if you're going to be one of those 8 people that make the team. And that's basically how I tried to treat every practice and every session we had in the film room. And especially for somebody like me, who was largely utility offensive lineman, played a fair amount, but I was not a regular starter in my career. I had to be that guy that was ready to come in at any given position, play a center guard or tackle, and a long snapper. Be ready to go.
And a long snapper. The thing about average is that sometimes it's just trying to avoid taking any risks. I just want to be good enough. 15 NFL linemen and only half are going to survive. Did you see some who were just trying to stay within their frameworks? I mean, what does it mean to be above average in that world?
Great question, Don. Well, it was more the fact that some of the veterans didn't make the team when Forrest Gregg took over. Forrest Gregg, I can assure you, set the bar plenty high, not just for the team, but especially for the offensive linemen. So if you were a player that just felt like you could cruise along and do what you did the last year, By the way, the Bengals were pretty bad the year before I got there. We weren't that good my rookie year either.
I mean,
Forrest Gregg would pretty quickly show you the door. There was no room for that in his mind or on his team. And that applied to everybody. Everybody had to up their game every single year. It was not, I achieved it this year and now I can just cruise along. So you had to get bigger, stronger, and more skilled, especially as an offensive lineman. The training, the work you put into the off season, the discipline that you imposed on yourself to become better at the offensive line craft, so that when I showed up at training camp, I was better than I was the year before. And that had to be true every single year.
wow. So that constant effort to be better was a driver in your NFL career. When you talk about the idea that you were a utility offensive lineman,
Yeah.
you played all 5 positions plus long snapper.
Plus a little tight end done.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever touch the ball as a tight end?
2 touchdown catches.
Oh, that's right, too, in Green Bay.
That's right.
But I know a lot of offensive linemen. I've actually written a book with a couple. And every time that a team moves them from one slot to the other, I mean, so many things are different. Preparing yourself to play essentially 7 positions on a football field. What did that take and what did that teach you?
There are 2 key components of that. One is just the mental requirement to learn each position. Every position has a different responsibility on every play.
Well, yeah, just the knowledge of the playbook.
And what each position has to do. Sure, I was primarily a backup center, so that was easily my most comfortable position. I always knew what I was doing when I was in playing center. But then I also had to drill myself mentally or with my teammates and also practice at the guard and the tackle position just so I know what was going on there too, if I had to go in the game in that role.
Wow.
It was funny. I remember my rookie year, Don, I had never attended an NFL game until I played in my first one.
You're kidding.
We were in Denver for the first preseason game, and I played the second half of center, first time ever playing. But then toward the end of the preseason, my offensive line coach threw me in as a tackle at the end of one of the preseason games. I felt so out of place being stuck out there on the end of the line, trying to pretend I was anything close to Anthony Munoz, who was a rookie with me, and we're still in touch. I was like, what am I doing out here? Let me go back in and play center. It's much more comfortable there. You had to be able to handle that in order to make the team and be a contributor.
Wow. Give me an example of how that concept of being able to play multiple roles play into what you try to teach those who work with you today at Touchstone.
Couple of ways. In my business, the business I've been in the last 30 years, it is also a highly competitive business, at least the way we run our business at Touchstone Investments and many other firms that I've worked for. You're measured against a benchmark, which is average. If all you can do is achieve the average or the benchmark in my business, similar to the NFL, you won't be in business very long. The whole business model that we have at Touchstone is being better than average year after year, being better than the benchmark year after year. And that requires you every single January 1 to wake up and understand you've got to do it all over again this year. I've got to be better this year. You can't just sit around and say, oh, last year was great, I'll just cruise this year. It doesn't work that way. And one of the key things in leadership is making sure you have the right people in the right roles. Obviously, on a football team, that's easy. You got 11 positions on each side of the ball, and you try to find the best person for each position to do that role in that particular offense or defense. But business is not that different. At Touchstone here, we've got over 100 people that work in the business, and some are in sales roles, and some are in marketing, and some are in our product area, and some are in operations. Everybody is a skilled professional in what they do, or they must be a skilled professional in what they do. But inevitably, business changes. You may have an emphasis in one area. You may need more resources in another area. And so sometimes you ask people to raise their hand and take on new responsibility or new job. We try to identify people who both have the willingness to do that and also the skills to cross-train or figure out how to do other things. Similar to what I had to do, where I was learning 4 or 5 different positions and had to understand how to play them. When we get people that are able to do those things in our business, we got a more valuable person because now we can plug them in different spots in our business when we need the help in the business.
Something tells me if you'd have told Forrest Gregg, no, sorry, I don't want to play tackle, I'm a backup center,
I would have gotten an earlier pass to law school.
Right. Because I think that's one of those things. A lot of times we talk about utility infielders or utility offensive linemen. In many team environments, especially when you got a limited roster, the ability to move from one position to another and do it, maybe not Anthony Munoz well, but
Right.
well enough that you're able to be functional is extremely important. And often that's just as true in our business lives. When we have the utility mindset, the willingness to be able to move, if you can bring that mindset to work, you might find yourself in a different career than you might have otherwise had.
Yeah, another way to think of it, a lot of teams and a lot of businesses as well have superstar players that are rainmakers or whatever it might be in any given environment. All the other people that are doing the work behind the scenes, they make that possible. Coming from an old offensive lineman, of course, I'm going to say that because those quarterbacks and those receivers and those running backs do nothing without us. But that's true in the business world as well. I said I've got over 100 people, and while less than half of that are my sales team out in the field actually making the sales, none of those sales get made without all the support they get from the team back here getting all the work done behind the scenes.
Love that. You lead by example. It's one of the things you talk about a lot as an important leadership strength. How did leading by example affect the way you lead today as a CEO?
Well, one of the most important things any leader does is set the expectation, set the bar that the team or the business is going to be expected to achieve. What level are we expecting you to operate at? The Bengals, I can't remember, they won like 4 or 6 games the year before. We had a rough rookie year when I joined the league and Forrest was in his first year. None of that really mattered to Forrest. His position throughout every single week and every single game was, we expect to win, we expect to go to the playoffs, and we expect to go to the Super Bowl. That was the expectation that was laid out at the beginning. We all were expected to operate at that standard.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty easy when you start an NFL season. Hey, our goal is to win the division, and then go to the playoffs and win the Super Bowl. And I can assure you, Don, I didn't start any season when we as a team didn't expect that was going to happen.
Even when you're coming off 4-12.
Didn't matter. If you were in training camp with Forrest Gregg,
right,
there was only one thing we were going to do, and that was be better and win. In the business world, we also set some pretty big goals. I don't care if we had a really rough year the year before. That doesn't mean we have an excuse not to execute at a higher level the next year. By setting those expectations, you get more out of people because you ask them to expand what they think they can do. You ask them to be better. Just like I realized I had to get better every single year as a player, I'm asking everybody on the Touchstone team to also get better at what they do, regardless of their role, every single year. Also, we align our incentive structure with what we're asking people to do and being very clear on the messaging from top down, what our expectations are as a business.
Yeah.
Also, part of my job, of course, just like any coach's job, is to make sure that everybody is empowered and has the resources to do what we're asking them to do. You can't set expectations and lofty goals and then not give them the tools or the resources to do what we're asking them to do.
I love that. Forrest Gregg would have agreed with that wholeheartedly.
I hope so. I learned a lot from him. Great coach to play for.
He was a fantastic leader.
Yeah.
You've played in what is known as the Freezer Bowl, one of the coldest games in NFL history. I know the numbers were crazy. I'd love to know, what was the atmosphere like within the team when you know you're getting ready to walk out into negative 59 degrees?
Well, that's a great one to bring up. And I think I just got cold. I get cold whenever I think about that game, Don. And of course, if you're a Forrest Gregg coach team, it was all part of the challenge. Yeah, it's going to be cold. Put it out of your mind. Ignore it. We're going to go out and play the game. That was easily the coldest I've ever been playing in that game. The wind chill was reported at 59 below.
Right.
But I will tell you, the second coldest, Don, that I think I've ever been playing football was practice that week outdoors before the game. Because Forrest said, look, we're playing in this. We're going to go out and practice in it. I don't want to hear any whining or complaining. And Friday, I think the wind chill was 30 or 40 below, and we're outside practicing it. None of us could believe it. And Forrest, talk about leadership by example. He's right out there with us, taking us through the drills. We're all out there. And then I'll never forget, we got to the game day, and we knew it was going to be brutally cold, and we all prepared as best we could for it. We went out for pregame warm-ups, which is not really an appropriate term for a day like that.
No, I was going to say there wasn't any warm.
But same routine. We do our long snapping drills and punting and kicking and warm-ups. I remember well the Chargers came out for about 5 minutes, and they were back in the locker room. We pretty much knew right then and there that the game was over. I realized the Chargers had played the week before in Miami, where I think it was 80 degrees. So you figure their temperature differential between week over week was about 150 degrees. Our starting offensive line went out sleeveless, Don.
Boy.
Just for the pure intimidation factor. I was not starting. I put on every piece of clothing I could find in the locker room. Everything. We still had guys that had some frostbite issues. We had fans that had frostbite issues. That stadium was still almost more than half full. People should not have come to that game, but they did. You come over to the sideline, and they had these gigantic propane flame throwers, basically, to generate heat on the sideline. And we would put our feet in front of them to try to warm your feet up. And then you'd realize, wait, my cleats are starting to melt, because to get your feet warm, you had to get it so close to the flame. So that didn't work. I was playing mostly special teams that day. So literally you'd sit on the sideline, then you'd run out for a play, kickoff return, or a field goal, whatever. And you just prayed that somebody didn't run into you, because it hurt like hell whenever you got hit. It was so cold. It was so cold. Well, it was wild. And that, of course, got us to the Super Bowl.
Right.
It was great.
Well, you're right. I mean, 27-7.
Something like that. Yeah.
So you're right. San Diego was not in that game.
No.
I was actually talking to our producer, Savannah, before this show, and I said, I've played in some cold, not like that, and it hurts in ways that people can't even imagine.
Yeah.
The simple act of running into someone else.
Oh, you just don't want to do it.
Right.
But it's football, so you kind of have to,
At some stage, people do run into each other.
Right.
So as a CEO in a market-driven business,
yeah,
challenges sometimes are expected, sometimes they're unexpected. How do you approach leading your team through known challenge versus one that's unknown to you?
Yeah. There are plenty of unexpected challenges in any business, but of course in ours as well, because of all the macro events that can occur that drive our ability to sell our mutual fund products and the other things that we talk about in our business. Our business is largely, from a sales and distribution standpoint, we're out in the field, meeting with people, traveling, having group meetings, talking. And of course, one of the things you learn in the NFL is the defense can change 2 seconds notice when you're at the line. You have to learn how to adjust. You might have a great game plan. You might have a good business plan. But if circumstances change, as a leader, you got to be able to adjust to that and figure out the best way to attack the current situation. So with the pandemic, literally within a few weeks, the ability to do business the way we were accustomed to doing business was shut down. Two options. You say, okay, well, we give up because we can't do it anymore. And that obviously is not a very good option. Or you adjust, rotate to a fully remote environment, figure out how to get the sales team plugged in a way up on Zoom or Teams or WebEx, whatever we were able to use to conduct meetings, phone calls, remote work at home. It was an enormous shift in business model. And yet, because people were trained and we put a plan in place and we executed on it rapidly and efficiently, it worked. The key when you go through things like that from a leadership standpoint is to make sure people understand there is a plan. We are going to figure out how to get it done. I know you can't go meet with these people. Pick up the phone and call them. Get on your computer and email them. Figure out how to do a conference call. Meanwhile, we will come up with better tools that allow you to do that more effectively. That's our job. You need to rely on us to do that, and you need to count on us to do that. But in the meantime, just keep doing all the things you can do. Don't let it freeze you up and shut you down, because there are always things you can do. Look, on the field, you got a busted play and things didn't go right. You don't just stand there.
Right.
You go find somebody to block. You find somewhere to run. You don't just quit. Same thing in the business world. If things don't go right, you fall back on your training, you fall back on the things you know, and you adjust.
I love that example. As a busted play, you go find somebody to block.
You never stop, no matter what.
Well, if you stop, you get an earlier pass to law school.
That's right. You're done.
Right. One of the questions we've asked almost every guest for the last 4 years is about team building. A lot of business organizations inappropriately refer to their group of people who work with them as a team. This is my team. The truth is, there are a bunch of individual contributors who all just happen to have the same business card.
Yeah.
But you've been on teams. You've actually worked with great team builders. If you were coaching one of us on how to build a team, how to take a group of disparate individuals and move them forward together, give me a couple of things you would do first.
Boy, that is the trick, right? I would start with be very clear what you are going to try to achieve as a team or as a business. What expectations you're going to set? What do you expect the business and the team to do? And make sure everybody knows it. No secrets, transparent. This is what we're trying to do. Then figure out how you're going to accomplish that goal. What are all the things that the leadership needs to do, everybody on the team needs to do? What are all the hundreds of things that need to get done to accomplish that goal? Part of that is right talent in the right roles, whether it's on the football field or in the business. I've been on plenty of teams where, as you say, it was called a team, but people felt it was more about the individual than the team. And I will tell you, inevitably, that pulled things apart, and you were never as successful as you would have been had everyone just put all that aside and figured out the common goal and how we're going to get there. And I'm not just referring to business, I'm referring to football as well. One of the great things about our Super Bowl team in 81, 82, my second year, was people say we were a team of unknowns, blah, blah, but we didn't really have any superstars on that team. We certainly didn't have anybody that acted like a superstar. And we had a common goal. We knew what we were trying to accomplish, and everybody was focused on making that happen, from the first person on the roster to the 45th. It was amazing how much we could accomplish when we approached it that way. It's easy to say there's no I in team and all that other stuff, but it's absolutely true. If you can put aside the personal ambitions and the ego and all the other stuff that goes along in many businesses, because you do have stars in business, but if you can find people that are able to be really good at what they do, but also embrace the rest of the people that are making it possible for you to be a star, you've got something going.
Given your experience, is there a secret to finding those people?
Well, culture is a word that's thrown around and used a lot, but it means different things to different people. A lot of it is establishing that culture so that people understand what is expected when you work within our organization. Every business that I've been a part of, that I've been leading, I've emphasized everybody has to contribute and everybody has to do their part. Nobody gets the superstar treatment. I don't get the superstar treatment. I mean, one of the things I think is really important about leadership is being willing to roll up your sleeves, sit in the room, do the hard work, listen to the things and the challenges that are going on. One of the pieces of advice I got when I first got into this business, one of my board members said, "Hey, Blake, you know what you need to do? You need to go out in the field and travel with some of your salespeople. Just don't sit back in your nice office in New York City and tell your salespeople what to do and what you expect. Go out and spend some time with them in the field and see what it's like." Never forget that. Took the advice. I have never forgotten the experience. First thing I learned was that I could never do the job they're doing. It's too hard for me. But that speaks volumes and also sets the tone for the culture. The leader has to be willing to understand what everybody is being asked to do. And even if I can't do it, I must appreciate it and understand what I need to do to support it.
Going on the road is such a valuable piece of advice. You know, you mentioned the importance of surrounding yourself with people who are not like you.
Yeah.
A lesson that you actually learned as a parent and apply today in business.
My wife would double down on that comment, Don.
She would double down on that.
Don't get more people like you.
She's like, one of you is enough.
Plenty. Yeah, thanks. What I've learned over my career is that if there's a lot of groupthink, if everybody comes into the office and there's only one idea and one point of view and one way to do things, before you know it, you'll get passed and beaten up on the road to success by people that are willing to embrace new ideas and change. When you've got a blitz pickup that happens in the last second before you snap the ball, if you just routinely do what you've done and aren't able to think about things differently, what's going to happen? Quarterback's going to get sacked. You're done. Same thing in business. Right now, we're trying to figure out what we do with AI and how we work that into our business. And that requires people not like me to think about this whole new technology and what it means to our business. We need people like that at Touchstone. So different skills, different ideas, different approaches, different perspectives, all important to evolving a business and making it successful. You also have to create a culture where people are comfortable having different viewpoints, having different perspectives, and expressing them. I'm not shy about pointing out any number of mistakes that I've made in my career in the past and the learnings that I've had to go through, because I often don't have the right answer. If I'm sitting in a meeting or we're doing brainstorming or strategy sessions, I want to know everybody else's viewpoint. I want to understand what they're thinking, because it can easily change my own viewpoint or my own approach. I try not to come into meetings with a preset idea. I may have some ideas, but I try to remain flexible when we're talking. If you're not, and people keep coming up with ideas, but they're never listened to or they're never enacted,
They'll stop.
yeah, pretty soon it's just your own voice in the room. That is never a good thing. So it's okay to have a different viewpoint from me.
Mm.
And I think if you ask my team, I hope they would say, oh, yeah, we've told Blake he's wrong plenty of times. And I am wrong plenty of times. Sure. Make sure you create that environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I catch myself, my wife is very good about this too, reminding me that if you aren't careful about that, people will just default to whatever you say or suggest. Be cognizant of that.
Yeah, a lot of leaders we've talked to or that I get a chance to learn from make it a point that when they walk into those rooms, they're not the first one to speak. Because unfortunately, if a leader speaks too early, everybody else thinks, oh, I better line up with that.
That's right. One of the things I'll do if we're interviewing a candidate or trying to figure out what we're going to do on a specific thing, I'll say, look, I'm going last. I want to hear everybody else before I weigh in.
That's awesome. Okay, I have to ask an O-line question. I was a defensive guy, so I don't know the answer to this, but you're an offensive lineman. You just messed up and a defensive lineman has just done a swim move, left you on the ground and stuck it to your quarterback. You run over to help the quarterback up.
Yeah.
What is the quarterback saying to you when you're helping them up because you screwed up? And what did that teach you that you might remember today? I'm assuming that's happened to you more than once.
Unfortunately, yes. I still have some nightmares about Dan Hampton and the Chicago Bears.
Oh, yeah. Danimal.
The Danimal. Oh, yeah. That defense. It's funny, Don, you say that. The quarterback, there's so little time when you're out there on the field between plays that as soon as one play is over, the quarterback doesn't have time to stand there and give you a lecture. Play clock has started. The next play is coming in. And oh, by the way, back in my era, Don, before I played so long ago, there was basically hardly even radio. We shuttled plays in. There was no communication in the helmet.
I know they sent him in on tablets, didn't they? Right? Like Moses?
No, they would send him in person. Like I would oftentimes run in with the play and say, this is the play. Or they would send a running back in with the play. So there was not a lot of time for lectures. Why didn't you get your block? Why didn't you get that done? Hey, yeah, the quarterback's not happy he got sacked. But most of that came after the game in film sessions where I can assure you there was plenty of time for that, usually hosted by Forrest Gregg.
A former lineman.
Yeah. You can imagine that Forrest Gregg had no love lost for the Cleveland Browns, but he made sure we knew that whenever we played them. We were playing the Browns up in Cleveland one game, and our starting center was out. So I was the center for that game. And it's never a good thing, Don, when you start the film session and Forrest shuts off the projector and says to the offensive line, but mainly to me, says, we made that nose guard look like Superman. I think it was Golick.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he had a phenomenal game. He was very good. And we got beat. Not exactly a highlight. But what do you do in that situation? It's really hard to hear that you've had a rough game. You got to sit there and take the critique. And trust me, there's no holding back. And in sessions like that, you wouldn't just go off the offensive line room. Forrest Gregg would sit in there and go through it along with the offensive line coach. But how do you respond to adversity? How do you pick yourself up and tell yourself, I can be better than what I was in that game. I can do better today than I did yesterday in my business life. That's such a lesson to learn that sports in general and the NFL in particular teaches you, because if you're not able to do that, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
Recover and move on.
That's it.
Like any sales business, you're told no a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And my sales team is told no a lot. They go in to make a pitch and no, I don't want that. I don't want to buy that. I want to buy something else. Their ability to recover from that and say, you know what, I may not get that one, but I will get the next one. It's kind of the same thing. You have to have that mentality. It's one of the things that makes you successful.
That's a great example because that is one of the great things about sports. What does it teach us? Jack Nicklaus, we had him on and he was talking about you may have one bad hole, but if you let one bad hole become 2 or 3 or 4.
That's right.
So you may have one bad snap. You may have one rejection as a salesperson. But if you let that get in your head and next thing you know, it's 2, 3, 4, then you might be out of a job.
You've got to have the mindset that you're going to be better and will be better. Always.
Right. Well, I will tell you, I'm better today because I got this chance, Blake, to spend it with you. I thank you today for being a corporate competitor with us.
Glad to do it, and really appreciate the time, Don. Thank you.
Minus 59. I cannot even imagine what it would be like to be out on the field, especially to be standing on the sideline for most of that game. I had several amazing takeaways from the conversation today. The first, the utility mindset. As a player, his role on the team was he had to know how to play 5 different positions on the offensive line, plus tight end, plus long snapper. 7 positions he had to be prepared for every Sunday to be able to contribute to the team. So difficult, but what it meant and his ability to develop that utility mindset. I will do whatever is asked. In fact, you ask, I raise my hand, led to him having the career that he did. Had he said to the coach, nope, I'm sorry, this is what I do, he would have had an earlier pass to law school. If there's a volunteer opportunity for you, raise your hand. If there's an opportunity for you to get a chance and help the team in a way that isn't typically part of your assignment, raise your hand. Love that. Second, if the play breaks down, go find somebody to block. One thing we're sure of is that there will always be moments that don't go to script. We built it. The play is for it to happen this way, but the opponent gets a vote too. And sometimes the opponent might just be the market. Sometimes it might be what you're up against. If you recognize that other things are going to happen, when something goes awry, go find somebody to block. Go find some way you can contribute to the solution. Don't just stand there. And then the third piece, the development of his team and how he now makes sure that they avoid groupthink. A lot of groupthink, you'll get passed up by others. And you have to have people on your team who are comfortable sharing different opinions. That's a leadership role to make sure the team understands. If you're working at Touchstone with Blake, you're free to let him know that you don't think he's right. My team feels comfortable telling me when they think I'm wrong, he said. Awesome conversation. I'm going to go turn the heater on. I appreciate you. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and review on Apple and Spotify. Feedback helps us spread the insights of our guests to a wider audience. It actually increases our ratings. Thank you so much for those who have done so in the past. And catch new episodes every Wednesday. Subscribe at corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to be the first to get a chance to listen. And as a thank you gift, I will send you a chapter from one of my best-selling books. Stay connected with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. My handle is @DonYaeger, DonYaeger. And until next week, I appreciate you.